Shalom to you from oneforisrael.org. This week's Torah portion is named after Korach, or as he's called in English, Korah, and it appears in the book of Numbers, chapters 16 through 18. The children of Israel are still going through the wilderness, and it's now about 38 years since they began their journey. It was supposed to take 11 days, but they got sidetracked. The text goes back and forth between explaining various laws and describing the situation on the ground. The people were getting fed up and began to revolt. They wanted to get to the land of milk and honey, and they wanted to get there now. This is ironic because it was this very attitude that kept them outside of the Promised Land for so long. It's a good example of the difference between God's ways of doing things and ours. In Numbers 16, Korah led a rebellion that included 250 men. Specifically, they questioned the fact that Moses and Aaron were the leaders. Verse 3 says, "You have gone too far, for all in the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" This is not an uncommon accusation today. They basically said, "Hey, who put you in charge?" This may be a legitimate question in some circumstances, but here it was inappropriate. Their real problem was not with Moses and Aaron, but with God. The roles and duties were already described in great detail, and there was no doubt that all of it came directly from God. That's why Moses said the following in verse 11, "Therefore it is against the Lord that you and all your company have gathered together." The root of all sin is rebellion in our hearts, putting ourselves and our desires above all else. This was the problem with Korah's rebellion. They were rejecting God's clearly revealed plan, and they were not content with what God had already provided. Much was given to them, but they wanted more. First, they were led out of Egypt. Not only that, these men were Levites. They had a unique and important role ministering in the tabernacle. Yet they didn't have some of the specific privileges that Aaron and his sons had. By comparing themselves with Moses and Aaron, they were revealing something about their own relationship with God. And instead of swallowing their pride, they themselves were swallowed up by God's wrath, as we see as the chapter continues. This scenario is alluded to once in the New Testament in Jude 1:11. Jude speaks of false teachers, those who show no reverence for God, and he writes, "Woe to them, for they walked in the way of Cain, and abandoned themselves for the sake of gain to Balaam's error, and perished in Korah's rebellion." A healthy desire for advancement in work or ministry is a good thing, but it must be done in God's timing. God is the one who gives us gifts and opportunities in the first place. But who are we really serving? Korah's rebellion, like our own, reminds us that we must serve God first, and that will change how we interact with one another. 1 Peter 4:10 says, "As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another, as good stewards of God's varied grace." Please join us again next week for another installment of 5 Alive. Wishing you God's shalom from oneforisrael.org, and don't forget to share.
Our ministry, One for Israel, is an initiative of native-born Israelis on the forefront of media and high-tech evangelism, boldly proclaiming salvation to Israel. Raising up leaders and equipping them with the tools they need to transform our communities. We also provide humanitarian aid to Holocaust survivors with the love of Yeshua. Join us as we share the gospel in Israel. Become One for Israel.